Hello and welcome to yesterday's airlines. It is time to take a look at the Gemini Jet's February announcements in 400 scale, and we will rank those releases as per usual. I have got a new pair of headphones, so hopefully the sound quality is better in this video than it was in my last ranking vid, so apologies for that, but it should be good from this point on. Now, looking at Gemini's previous release set and how that came out, once again, I've got the photos here for that release set, and the models turned out not too bad. It was a smaller set than usual, but looking at the models, we've got the American Airlines MD-90. I actually have acquired this model, so this is my first Gemini purchase of the year, which bodes quite well since it's only January, because I only bought two Geminis last year. So I've got one this year. I've just unboxed that one myself, actually had a look at it. It's not too bad. It's not spectacular. It's pretty good. And nice to see some MD-90s. I've also got the JC Wings SAS MD-90 on the way, so that one should hopefully be arriving soon too. But that's JC, not Gemini. Also out in that previous month's smaller release set was another Atlas Air 747. Nothing to write home about, but do like the interactive mold, so it's nice and it looks like it turned out quite well. And then we've got the Hawaiian A330. Yeah, this one's, again, it's nothing to write home about. It's very standard Gemini, but it turned out looking okay on what is not the best mold in the universe. And similarly, you can say the same about the Edelweiss A350, which again turned out looking okay, not on the best mold in the universe. And I don't think, from what I've seen, that they got the shape of the painting on the inside of the winglets correct, which you'd expect them to do so, but they didn't. So either way, I'd probably aim for another brand if I was looking for that. And the last model of the month was the Qantas Link Aboriginal Airbus A220, and yeah, again, it looks like it turned out okay. But again, the shortcomings of the mould, they are what they are. If I was an Australian collector, it probably wouldn't stop me getting it, but I would really be hoping someone else made an A220. So it was a decent month, I guess, in terms of delivery last month from Gemini. Moving in to February, we've got a more standard sized selection of releases here. So we've got the usual 10 or 11 models, but one of them comes with an interactive version and a standard version, which is interesting to release both those in the same month. But what does strike you very much about this set is how incredibly North American centric it is. Only one of the releases is outside of North America. And I wonder whether that is Gemini bumping up the schedule for American releases before Trump's 10% tariffs come into play. I mean, Gemini do release a lot of American stuff anyway, so it's not unusual, really, I guess. But having only one model not being American is perhaps a little unusual even for Gemini. So I wonder if they've just pushed up the schedule for some of those American releases to get them in before the tariffs hit. Yeah, just speculation though. Okay, anyway, let's get on and check out this not especially diverse release set. But before I do that, obviously, as always, chuck a like on the vid if you're enjoying it. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much to everyone that has, and always appreciate that. And don't forget to check out my other channels on Instagram, Yesterday Airlines, and on Facebook, and of course, yesterday's at airlines.com. What have I been up to this week? Well, this week, if you haven't seen already, I did a review of the new Panda Model 767-300 mold. That was an Air Sahara version, and that was an awesome looking model. Really impressive, and couldn't score any better, frankly, in the review. Really good. I also have gone through and rewritten the 767-300 mold review, going through all the molds that have been made for the type and having a look at those with photos and talking a bit about that. So that is well worth checking out if you haven't seen that already and you're interested in the history of the 767-300 in the scale, which is really complex. So check that out as well. But those are two of the things I've done this week. The other thing I did was whack another video on the site here. If you haven't seen that already, do so. Looking at my Jinglong diorama and the updates that have come recently for that, which includes a new background, monorail, bus station, new terminals, roadways, been doing quite a bit of work on the model airport, and hopefully I'll be doing some more videos on that soon. But now let's get on and check out the Gemini Feb announcements. Okay, so starting with the only Airbus of the month, this one is a Virgin Atlantic A330-900 GVSRB. I think the VSRB stands for Sir Richard Branson, the SRB, and it's in the 40th anniversary scheme, which is basically the standard Virgin livery, but with a 40th logo on the back end. It looks quite nice. They probably could have done something a bit more exciting, but it looks quite nice. And if you're a Virgin collector, surely you're going to have to get this model. Now, there haven't been that many Virgin A330-900s in the scale to date. There has been one previously from Gemini themselves. They made VJazz in March 2023. A3400 made VTOM, and so did Phoenix. And those have been the only ones that have been made. And of those, I'd say the best one was the original Gemini, and looking at some pictures of it, it looks pretty good. And I do like the Gemini JC A330-900 Neo mold. It's a really quite nice looking mold. Sometimes the wings are a little higher, but generally it's a good mold and it looks nice. And there's no reason to expect that this model won't similarly be as nice too. So this one got a lot of potential, I think, and I'm going to put this one up into High Flyer. Now, next up, we're moving into Boeings. Most of the set this month are Boeings, and we have a 737-700 as the next model. This one is Southwest Airlines, wearing the current scheme. The reg is N943 Whiskey November. Now, there had been quite a lot of complaints about the NG versions of these in terms of the blue being too dark, and can't argue with that, it was. But I'm not sure that I take this mold over the NG because the colour was too dark. You know, I've got a couple of these JC Gemini 737-700s. I mean, the one you can see in the picture here is a Kunming Airlines version from JC. It's a really not good mold. It doesn't really look that much like a 737. It's just kind of chunky in all the wrong places. So I really don't like this mold that they're using. I really wish they'd replace it. I've heard rumours that there is going to be a new 737 NG coming from JC Wings, but as is often the case with JC, everything takes ages and ages. So this one's not going to be particularly impressive, but I know that it's going to sell well because I know so many people are keen on getting one with the right colours. So if you're a colour fetish person rather than a mould fetish person, I'm definitely the mould guy, then you will probably want this one, and you wouldn't have got those previous NGs. But personally, I'd put up with the blue myself. Anyway, I'm going to put this one into Workhorse. I mean, it doesn't excite me, and there have been quite a few others. I mean, you could have bought the Panda Models versions as well, which I'm not sure what the colour was like on those, probably fine, and they'd be much better than this too. So it's not like there aren't alternatives out there. Next up, we've got a couple of 737-800s, and everything I've said about the mould applies also to that 738 mould, which they sometimes can't fit the wings to properly either. So the mould really not spectacular, though sometimes it can look okay if they get everything right. Sometimes it can look truly atrocious. First one up there in Mexico in their new scheme, N957AM, is the reg. I can't say I'm overly sold on this Aero Mexico scheme. I didn't love the last one, but this kind of zipper type transition between the white and the... Is it blue or is it purple? Let's pretend. Let's say it's blue. my colour identification is dreadful. I mean, that's not great. The new chap on the tail just doesn't look very good. It looks kind of, I don't know, it just looks really kind of, it doesn't look as good as it used to look, frankly. I mean, it looks computer generated, looks kind of stylized, but in a really kind of not great way. I mean, I personally have preferred pretty much all the previous Aero Mexico liveries, and they seem to be getting worse over time. Yeah, I don't like it very much. Don't particularly like the mould much either here, I have to say. I'll just put this one into Workhorse, and I would be very surprised if we didn't see an Aero Mexico 737-800 in this scheme from others. So I'd just wait for that one, personally. Next up, we've got a United Airlines 737-800 in the Star Alliance scheme. N76516 is the aircraft. Yeah, as you'd expect, this one is hardly a revelation in terms of it having not been made before, there have been a selection of Star Alliance 737s made previously, though admittedly not large numbers in recent years, and not always in this version of the schemes. This one's got the blue engines and winglets, sharklets, and it's got the Blue United on it. There has been a version from NG though that has been made before of this, so it's not like it's never been made. They made N14219 back in 2020, and yeah, you may be saying, oh, 2020 is such a long time ago, which it isn't, but it's probably not impossible to find that model if you want it. I mean, you may be a new collector, and I hear this argument, oh, it's great to have, you know, another version of it, even though it's been made better before. But it's not that hard to find models that are on the seconds market, and you just need a bit of patience. And B, it's 5 years later, and they're producing a model which is worse. I mean, it's just a bit insulting, really. So I don't understand this release. It's not going to be particularly good, and you know, I'm tempted to put this one into gas guzzler. I think I will. In my opinion, I'm incredibly generous to Gemini and some of the mold failings that they have, and some of the release sites they have. I'm being overly fair sometimes. I think this one probably is a gas guzzler, and I could have probably gas guzzled a couple of those other 77s, but for the reasons I've talked about, I'll workhorse them. Okay, moving on into the wide bodies. Now, we've got a lot of cargo releases this month. And we're going to talk first off about the 777s, I think. So first up, we've got a pair of Atlas Air 777 freighters. And this is where you've got both a standard version and an interactive version of N703 Golf Tango. Both molds are excellent. And I really like the interactive models, as I've said many times. I've got a couple of interactive freighter 777s myself. I've Chinese ones, unsurprisingly. I've got China Postal, for example. Really like that model. That was a JC release. I do like the interactive, though it's not quite as cool as the interactive 747s, I admit. But it is cool, and I really like that. The other standard release will also be super nice, and the only other brand that's made an Atlas Air 777 to date is Phoenix, who made it in September, and their release looked nice. The mold isn't quite as good. I would say that I'm thinking of putting actually the interactive one up here into Supersonic. I think that is a really strong model, and I'm tempted to put that one into High Flyer as well. The other 777-300 this month is in the colours of Kalita Air. This one, N779CK. Kalita doesn't have a particularly nice scheme anymore. It's kind of retro-y, and it's got these giant tiles, but it's not particularly classy. Mind you, Kalita has never been particularly classy airline, admittedly. This model has also been made by Phoenix recently. They made it in July. The mold's great here, but it's kind of lacking a lot of excitement. And I don't like it as much as Atlas Air, the livery. I'm tempted to put this one just into Workhorse, I think. Okay, and that just leaves us with a couple of models to discuss. One is a 777-300 freighter, and this one is in the colours of FedEx N144FE. And this one's wearing the new FedEx scheme, which doesn't have the express titling on the fuselage and doesn't have any titling on the engines. So it's actually less of a livery than it was before, though it makes a bit of sense to get rid of the express. I don't like the look of this as much as I did on the 777, I admit. But it's such a bread and butter a release for Gemini that you know, you can't really criticise it. People are going to want it. People are going to buy it. It's going to be a perfectly okay model. The old Gemini 767-300. It's solid, reliable, got a giant seam on it, but it's not offensive. It's a very old mold, but it's not a bad mold. Obviously, this would get massacred by the new Panda 767-300, but I doubt that they'll ever release a FedEx version. So this one's fine. I'll put it in the high flyer. Sure, there's some strong demand there for it. And that just leaves us with the last model of the month, and this one is another MD-80. Gemini have been sprinkling out more MD-80s recently, and you can't help but think that that's partly because NG have got a mold, which they're not using enough, as I always complain. This one is Delta Airlines. It's N925DL. It is wearing the Landor colours, the Ron Allen scheme that was between 97 and 2001. Not a particularly loved livery, but one that is nonetheless still quite important in Delta's history. And yeah, I remember when I saw this for the first time in 97 thinking, oh, that's a bit mundane. But at the same time, it's kind of grown on me a bit. I don't dislike it that much. It's just not as cool as the widget. It'll be fine, won't it? But it's still not going to be as good if NG could get their act together and make a few more MD-80s. And if they make this version, which surely they will at some point, then it's going to be better. The Gemini MD-80... just the front of it isn't spectacular, but it's a strong 7 out of 10 mold. It's not one that I don't like buying, but nowadays I tend to think twice about whether I would get a Gemini version of it. So I'll put this one into high flyer as well. It's a good choice, but the mold is, yeah, it just is. And in summary, looking at this release set, obviously it's incredibly US-centric. That's not really a bad thing for a majority of Gemini buyers, and Gemini's, you know, got a much better reputation in the States than it does elsewhere in the world, I would argue, and partly I think that's just brand loyalty or, hey, dare I say it, ignorance. But, you know, they're decent, solid models. Are they exciting? They would be more exciting if Gemini could get its act together in terms of the molds it's using. Because when you look through the releases here, it's got a 737-700, which is pretty poor. It's got a 737-800, which is as poor. It's got a 767-300 mold, which dates from about the year 2001. And it's got an MD-80, which has never been great. And the only good, solid, really good molds in this set are the 777s. And arguably the A330 is creeping up near there as well. So you've got some really ordinary molds. Even if you really think the airlines are great, the molds that they're used on often aren't. But it's a solid set. It's an okay set. There's nothing offensive about it. They're okay models. They will be okay. And frankly, Gemini seems fine just making okay models. And most people buying Gemini models are fine just buying okay models. And that's okay. So that's my view on this. Perfectly ordinary, decent set, nothing special. Anyway, that is it for this video. Not sure what the next video will be. Might get back out to Jinglong and see what arrivals there have been at the airport. So maybe that will be my next vid. Not sure. Also not sure how many more announcement vids there'll be in February because, you know, we're coming out of Chinese New Year. But I guess we'll find out soon. From now, it's the end of this vid. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you next time.